We're now live on YouTube.
Okay, nearly at 6 o'clock, so we'll start on time. Okay, good evening, members, and thank you all very much for joining me this evening. This is my last full council as mayor, accepting annual council, which is a somewhat different affair. And I know it is also the last council meeting for a number of members who are retiring this time. We will come to comments from group leaders in recognition of the service of members shortly. Before we start the meeting, the main meeting, we're going to just have a short period of reflection and comment for His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh, who passed away last week, as everyone is aware. So I know that, I mean, his service was really quite extraordinary. 73 years at the side of Her Royal Highness the Queen, and Her Majesty the Queen, rather. And yes, it really was a quite remarkable period of service, and his dedication was there for everyone to see. So without further ado, we're going to go first of all to Canon Hilary Barber for some prayers, and then I'm going to call on the group leaders to pay tribute to His Royal Highness, and then to anyone else who would like to speak after that. Okay, so over to you, Canon Hilary. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So today we give thanks for the life of Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, and for all who mourn him, particularly the royal family and Her Majesty the Queen. The royal family are like any other family to which you and I belong, and we're mindful at this time of the pandemic that there are many other families who are mourning the loss of loved ones, some who've died as a result of COVID, but others who've died as a result of other illnesses. And so in this prayer for Prince Philip and the royal family, we set them alongside the citizens of this nation whom they have faithfully served, and in particular Prince Philip. Almighty God, Father of all mercies and giver of all comfort, deal graciously, we pray, for all who mourn, the members of the royal family, this nation, and all the nations of the Commonwealth, that casting all our care on you, we may know the consolation of your love, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. And so now, as we gather as elected members and officers of the borough of Calderdale, we pray for the towns and villages whom we serve, mindful of the current pandemic, of all who continue to serve the community in the acute hospital trust, in community medicine and public health. We rejoice with those who this week have been able to lift restrictions and to begin their business again. We share the frustration with those unable to do so at this time. And we pray for all who make Calderdale a sustainable community in the private, public and third sectors. Almighty God and Father, you have so ordered our life that we're dependent on one another. Prosper those engaged in commerce, industry, education and healthcare, and direct their minds and hands that they may rightly use your gifts in the service of others. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. And now we pray for this council, for its elected members and officers, giving thanks this evening for those who have faithfully served as elected members, some for whom for many years. We remember too those who are bravely standing for public office in the elections, those seeking re-election and those standing for the first time. We bring to God tonight's agenda and we ask him to be with us in our listening, in our speaking, and in our decision making. Almighty and eternal God, to whom we must all give account, guide with your Spirit the elected members of this council, that they may be faithful to the mind of their God and seek in all their purposes to enrich our common life. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. And finally, we seek God's blessing on our own lives and our families, on the communities that we serve, and this borough of Calderdale. God grant the living grace to the departed rest, to the Church, the Queen, the Commonwealth, and all humanity, peace and concord, to us and all his servants, life everlasting. And the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, come down upon you and remain with you always. Amen. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much for that, Hilary. It's much appreciated. Okay, so I will now go to the group leaders for to pay tribute to His Royal Highness Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. And first, I'd like to go to Councillor Tim Swift, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for agreeing to include this opportunity for us as part of the meeting. An opportunity, first of all, to record our sorrow at the death of His Royal Highness, the Duke of Edinburgh, to extend our sympathies to the Queen and the royal family, and also to express some appreciation of the Duke's lifetime of public service. I just wanted to talk briefly about three contrasting aspects of his work, his life, and his interests. It's been very interesting during all the coverage to pick up some of the detailed stories behind the Duke's war service in the Navy. If you've only looked at the short summaries, what tends to be highlighted is a reference to participation in the Battle of Matapan, where he was mentioned in dispatches, and his presence at the surrender of the Japanese at the end of the war. But actually, and you might imagine from that his role involved some privileged position on grand ships of the fleet. But if you look into it further, actually the reality is very different. Most of the Duke's wartime service was on relatively small, often quite vulnerable vessels, including a year on the unglamorous, exhausting, vital and dangerous work protecting convoys and shipping off the East Coast. A very long way from the image you might form if you simply saw pictures of him in his ceremonial uniforms in later years. Secondly, I've been struck by the references to his lifelong interest in engineering and manufacturing, and his views, which I share really, that these are not always sufficiently valued in this country. And there's an interesting Calderdale connection here. I shall of course leave it to Councillor Carter to talk about his visit to Halifax in 2004. But the Duke and the then Princess Elizabeth first visited Halifax in 1949, just 2 years after their marriage. And the locations they visited included an exhibition at the Drill Hall in Arden Road, as it was then, where he viewed an exhibition by 30 local manufacturers. He also, on that visit, came to the Town Hall and to Spring Hall on the occasion where the latter building was formally handed over to the Halifax Corporation. Thirdly, I want to mention as part of his lasting legacy, his lifelong interest in wildlife and conservation. The great naturalist Sir Peter Scott invited him to become involved in the founding of the World Wildlife Fund. And it's easy, with the benefit of hindsight, I think, to forget that back in 1961, when the Duke launched the fund's first national appeal for money to help save the natural world, concerns about the impact of humanity on the natural world were a much narrower and more specialised interest than they are today. And the Duke's involvement was vitally important in drawing public attention to that work and in raising its profile throughout the following years. Madam Mayor, there is much, much more that could be said about the Duke's lasting legacy and his service as part of an extraordinary period for the monarchy, which I suspect will never be matched in terms not only of its length, but in also the social, economic and technological changes that have taken place over that period of time. Once again, our deepest sympathies go to the Queen and the royal family, alongside our appreciation of the Duke's lifetime public service. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that interesting and informative tribute, Councillor Swift. Over to you, Councillor Lee. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And may I first say I totally agree with the sentiments expressed by Councillor Swift, and for the snapshot of the wonderful work performed by the Duke of Edinburgh. And so we sent a message to the Queen on Saturday, and I'll read out what we sent. And I think when that's added to what Councillor Swift has said, I think it shows a true indication of the strong feeling that we all have for the Duke. So it went to the Queen. On behalf of the members of the Conservative group on Calderdale Council in West Yorkshire, we send you our love and deepest condolences on the passing of your husband and consort, the Duke of Edinburgh. Truly a great man. Alongside you, and in his own right, he has made a massive contribution to our nation and the Commonwealth throughout his life. We celebrate his life and achievements, whilst mourning his loss, and now hope and trust that the prayers of the nation, the devotion of your subjects, and the great love of your family will support and sustain you through this very sad time. God save the Queen.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lee. Next, I'll go to Councillor James Baker, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And then same, the Liberal Democrat group obviously passed on our condolences to the Queen. I mean, she's such a figure in all of our lives, and so is Philip. But to lose a partner of so many years on a kind of human level is something I think it's really important to reflect on as well. The aspect I wanted to talk of the Duke's life is really his work with young people and the Duke of Edinburgh Awards. I think it is so formative in so many people in our society's lives, going through that process of doing Duke of Edinburgh, not just to putting on the big backpack and hiking over hills and having that perhaps, you know, one of your first experiences away from your family home with friends and having to overcome, you know, adversity and difficulty, but also the caring aspects of the Duke of Edinburgh Award, how people, you know, in order to complete it, have to go and do caring roles within their community as well. And I think it's really important to give young people those experiences and teach them that sense of duty, you know, duty for their community, because communities are so important. And I think that's something that goes throughout the Duke's life, of his lifelong service and sense of duty. And it's a trait which is probably in decline in the modern era a little bit. It's not as fashionable to be dutiful, but I think I hope from his passing, it is something that people reflect on and consider that it does have value in so many regards, and is an admirable trait in our society to hold on to. So thank you, Madam Mayor, for giving me the opportunity to say that. And our condolences go on to the Queen and all the other family members who've lost a loved one.
Thank you very much, Councillor Baker. Now, Councillor Raystrick, as leader of the independent group, would you like to say something?
Well, I think he had an amazing life, an amazing character, and I think the condolences go to all his family and the broader nation. I think we've all felt a little bit of a loss this week. But if I think he was sat here now, I think it's shall we get on with it a bit? Because I think he had a sense of humour.
Indeed so. Thank you, Councillor Raystrick. Councillor Carter, you've indicated you wish to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to start off by saying that when you're the centre of a royal visit, you don't always realise what is seen by the public outside, and it struck me a lot this last week that people didn't realise that there was something else went on besides the Queen and the Prince Philip in the Peace Hall. Because when they first came to Halifax, they were met at the station. The Queen went with the leader of the council at that time, Councillor John Ford, to Halifax High and to meet young people. And the Duke of Edinburgh actually went to the town hall to meet me. And I suppose he got the short straw, really. But just to put a little bit of meat on the bones there and the reasons why it was the town hall, Councillor Swift has already indicated that they came to Halifax in 1949. And there was a programme set for them in 1949 by the then Mayor, Councillor Alderman John Burdock, which you might never have met him. A few of us around, I think a few of us did, me, and I don't know who else around this in this meeting, but I met Councillor Alderman John Burdock. But he is, Burdock Way is named after him. And he was the mayor in 1949. And they put together a programme and they did a booklet on that programme. And in 2003, when I was mayor, we got a phone call from his wife's niece to say that she'd got a lot of paperwork belonging to Alderman John, and would the council like it? So she came and brought all this stuff, and in among it was a big scrapbook that had been put together by the mace bearer of his year. And in it was the brochure that had been done in 1949, plus all the other photographs and the people that they met and the courier reports. So when it was indicated that they were able to come and visit us, it was decided that we would try and replicate some of that visit. So Councillor Swift, in the town hall, in the main hall, we had the self-same businesses, some of the self-same businesses that he had met in 1949, that were still there, still within manufacturing and engineering. And we had the young people from the Music Centre's guitar ensemble who played for him on the balcony. And then Councillor Baker in the Mayor's Parlour, guess what? We invited all the young people that year who were due to receive a Duke of Edinburgh's award so that they could meet him face to face. Sometimes when they go to the palace, it isn't the Duke that actually presents, it just depends on his commitments. And I have to say, I've been thinking about it since Friday, which had never really struck me since till then, actually. It wasn't an elderly gentleman I met, and he was 82 when I met him. He was a very, very young 82, a very sprightly 82, not just in body, but in mind. And I had a fantastic hour with him in the town hall. One I'll never forget. And the people that were there won't either. And even now, people still talk to me that I know about the young people with the Duke of Edinburgh's awards. We allowed them to bring one visitor, one guest as well. So they were there at the time. He made a lot of people feel very special that day. And it really struck me that I guess people didn't realise that that part of the visit had happened. And it was just mainly on the Peace Hall. So I have to say that being the politician, being the mayor, it's not easy to understand always what it feels like to be the consort. But my husband had been chairman of the parish council, so I had to learn to walk 2 paces behind him at one point. And I guess when I met the Duke, it really struck me the supportive nature that he had for the Queen. And and I've noticed it even more, you know, since I met him. And while he never put himself in the forefront of things, but his knowledge, his understanding, his ability to put people at ease on that day. And if I don't know, the courier rang me on Friday because they hadn't many photographs and asked me if I had any. I don't know whether they were printed this week, but there's one when he arrived at the station, he spoke to us, and his first comment was, why are all the ladies in Halifax dressed in blue? Ironically, we all had the same shade of blue on as the Queen. The High Sheriff's wife, the Vice Lieutenant, Lord Lieutenant's wife, me, it was all the same shade of blue. So we were all dressed in pale blue. And then he promptly got hold of the gong on the bottom of the chain and yanked it towards him to read it and said, and what's this all about on the bottom of here? I guess a typical Duke of Edinburgh Prince Philip thing to do, to put me at ease too. Bearing in mind, I have been told I had to be on my best behaviour by a lady who I don't think is in this meeting. She might be, but I don't think she will be, who is the only other person in the council that I'm aware of that actually spent any time with him and met him on close, because she was with me when he was in the town hall. So I guess he's had a big lasting thing in my life, and something I would never ever forget. But somebody who was really special. Thought about other people as well, like the Queen, not himself. Went out of his way to make it a good day for everybody who was there. So likewise, my sincere condolences and sympathies go to Her Majesty the Queen and her family at this very, very sad time.
Thank you very much for your recollections and your memories and sharing them, Councillor Carter. For all of us who weren't there at that time and didn't have your experience, it's a really interesting insight to what it's like to actually host a royal visit, which is something that most of us haven't done. So, yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Findy, for that. Is there anybody else that would like to speak? I'm not seeing any indication. Okay, in which case we will move on to the main business of the meeting. So item number 1 then, members, minutes of the council held on the 10th of February and the 22nd of February this year. I beg to move that the minutes of the council held on the 10th of February 2021 and the 22nd of February 2021 to be approved as a correct record. I hope Councillor Gallagher is here to second.
Madam Mayor, Councillor Young has his hand up as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Was it for a comment, Councillor Young?
Yes, Madam Mayor. On the meeting of 22nd of February, on page A359, my name hasn't been included as voting for the budget. I know I was having internet problems that night. If that can be added, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Yes, I think there was you were having some quite significant problems with your internet connection that evening. But yeah, we'll check up on that and make sure that is sorted for you. Thank you. Councillor Riveron, did your hand come up?
No, apologies, Madam Mayor. I was just adjusting my connection. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. It's kind of hard to tell. Okay, thank you very much. Do I have a seconder, please? Is Councillor Gallagher here? Okay, thank you, Councillor Young. Thank you for that. I know Councillor Gallagher's been having trouble getting into the meeting, so I'm sure she'll be here as soon as she can. Okay, thank you very much for that then, members. All in favour, please show.
Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, members. And any against?
That's last time, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, members. Okay, that is carried. Item 2 Members, I need to remind you of the need to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests or other interests you might have in relation to the items included on the council summons. You can either declare their interests if known at this time, or at the time the item is being considered and the interest becomes apparent. Thank you. Item 3, Mayors and Chief Executives announcements. I have no announcements specifically, but this is my opportunity to invite the group leaders to say some words of thanks, and some comment on service about the members who are standing down in this election. So first of all, I'm going to go to Councillor Tim Swift, who will say something about the Labour members who are standing down this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and returning very much to the theme of thanking people for public service. And I want to particularly mention briefly the 3 Labour colleagues who have decided not to stand again at this election. And interesting, actually, all of them were first elected in the same year, in 2012. So first of all, Councillor Ann Collins, I'm sure I think every member on the council will have had the opportunity to appreciate and understand just how hard Councillor Collins works, often on things behind the scenes, not always fully appreciated. Of course, we'll all be aware of her involvement in and passion for children and young people's services, which reflects also her past career and lifelong involvement with schools. But perhaps not everybody will be so much aware of the many years in which, for example, she has chaired the fostering panel, an enormously time-consuming and detailed piece of work, and something that I suspect we will find quite challenging to replace in the years ahead. And that's only one example of her willingness to take on really substantial and important roles, which are not always necessarily high profile. Secondly, Councillor Elisa Lambert, sadly, is not standing again for re-election. Of course, those who were here at the time will have great memories of Councillor Lambert's year as mayor, which was a particularly lively and enjoyable one for all of us. But of course, that's only part of what she did in the council. I know she's done a great deal of work in North Halifax in various ways, is very involved in that community, and I'm sure will continue to be so. And of course, more recently has chaired the Governance and Business Committee. And finally, Councillor Steve Sweeney. I'm really sorry Councillor Sweeney was unable to be with us this evening. Those who've been here throughout his time will know how well informed Councillor Sweeney was on almost any issue that he became involved with. He brought to his period as a councillor a host of experience around youth and community work, served for a period of time in cabinet, and of course more recently has been a hugely important member of the council in his role as chair of the planning committee. So I'd like to say thank you on behalf of the Labour group, and I hope the whole council, to all 3 of my colleagues who are not standing again. I'll also briefly say, I know others want to speak to them, but I also will say our thanks and sincere appreciations to Councillor Carter and Councillor Hardy, both of whom have very lengthy track records of service as councillors and wider public service, both of whom will also be missed. You know, it's important to recognise at these times that whatever our political differences, the overwhelming majority of councillors serve because they believe it's a way of helping and improving their communities. And we might disagree about how that should be done, but that shared commitment to public service is important and needs to be valued and recognised. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Swift, and I entirely agree. Okay, over to Councillor Lee for some comments about the Conservative members that are standing down this time. Thank you, Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, may I absolutely endorse and agree with the comments made by our leader about the 3 retiring Labour councillors. all three excellent, wonderful councillors with, as you said, Tim, serving the public at heart, and they'll be missed as well from this council. We've got two very long-standing, as has already been said, councillors leaving council this time, and they are Councillor John Hardy and Councillor Geraldine Carter. And I would like to ask, if I may, Madam Mayor, for Stephen, Councillor Baines, to first say some words about John Hardy, and then I'll follow Stephen with some comments about Councillor Carter. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Of course, that's perfectly fine. Councillor Baines, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd take this opportunity as well to welcome the words that the leader, Councillor Tim Swift, has said about all councillors with their service to the communities. Coming on to John, I've known John a long time. He has been a member of the Yorkshire County Cricket Club with me, hard-working volunteer at the Halifax Minster, being church warden for some time. And if you went on a tour of the Minster up until recently, it would have been John who was your guide. He owned and worked in the newsagents on Union Street, Halifax, and was a fully active member of the Halifax Conservative Association. When he sold the newsagents, he became the qualified professional agent for the Halifax Conservatives, assisting the election of many Conservative councillors. Perhaps his worst action was to encourage me to join the Conservative Party. He was first elected to council for Whalley Ward in 1988 until 96, and then again in 2003. He later represented Skircutt Ward from 2008 up to the current time. He has held many positions within the council. The one that he enjoyed the most was his year as mayor in 2012-13. His charity was the Community Foundation Calderdale, and with them he raised £250,000 in the year. The foundation raised quite a bit of money by an organised fundraising bike ride from Land's End to John O'Groats and then back to Halifax. When they returned, John joined them at Todmorden for the final stretch, the first time in ages that he had been on a bike, and his body suffered for it. John also made a lot of mainly young people very happy every year in the weeks before Christmas, when he became Santa for any group or organisation that wanted a Father Christmas to attend their function. He has always been a hard-working councillor and earned the respect of numerous Calderdale citizens who he has helped over his time as a councillor. I, for one, will miss his humour at all times and serious contributions to debate. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Baines, and I echo your comments. Councillor Hardy, you will be missed. You've always been a fine and upstanding councillor, as has everybody else who is resigning before I get caught out with that one. Okay, thank you. Over to you, Councillor Lee, for your comments about Councillor Carter. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, members all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to say some words about Councillor Carter. May I first just absolutely agree with all of the comments made by Stephen Baines about Councillor Hardy, and we wish him good health in the future. And you'll certainly be missed, John, by I think all of the members of this council. So thank you for a job well done. Right, well, you can't imagine, I think you can imagine, it's been difficult to even plan exactly what to say about Councillor Carter. And the dilemma I've had in preparing a few notes is they became more and more notes. I think I know what I want to say at the end of this, but I'm not quite sure how to start at the beginning. So I know you'll bear with me. And I don't want to take too much time, but some time will have to be taken. So Councillor Carter is retiring after 23 years on the council, during which time she's given very dedicated service, as you'll hear. She's been involved in an astonishing number of roles and activities, some of the very highest profile. I'll take a moment to mention just a small selection of the things she's been involved in over those 23 years, some of which feature amongst her current activities. Please prepare to be amazed. So, first of all, some of the activities she's been involved with outside of the council. I'll go through this list. It's not exhaustive. There are many others. During this period, she has been and is still a trustee of the Regimental Museum of the Duke of Wellington's Regiment. She has been a director of the South Pennine Royal Rural Regeneration Company. She's been a director of the Together Learning Trust and of the Rochdale Canal Trust and of Voluntary Action Calderdale and of the Community Foundation for Calderdale. And of course, she's been a local councillor too. And I think all members present will know and understand the diverse duties of being a ward councillor. And Geraldine has sat at the very heart of the Ripponden and wider Ryburn community and performed all her duties to the very highest standards. She's delivered an exceptional level of service to residents by listening to concerns, answering questions, and getting things done. Now, moving on to some of her accomplishments before we get directly onto the council activities. She was selected as a parliamentary candidate for Bradford South in 2005, candidate for the West Yorkshire Police Commissioner in 2012. She was elected to Ripponden Parish Council 30 years ago and still is involved on that parish council. She's just about been on all of the various cabinets and portfolios and responsibilities and scrutiny groups. And of course, she was a local government association representative, Visit Britain Tourism. She's been on the police and crime panel. She's a governor of Ripponden Junior School and Ryburn Valley High School. She's a member of the Yorkshire Tourism Council and the Calderdale representative on West Yorkshire Police Authority. She has been the mayor of Calderdale in 2003-04 and deputy mayor in 2007-08. Whilst she was mayor of Calderdale, her chosen,
I'm here now.
Her chosen charity was Epilepsy Research. And at the time, this was the highest amount raised purely by the mayor's fund in a year. It was £92,000. And that's a long time ago, and it would be worth a lot more than that right now. And I think that is still the largest amount that's been raised. She also has some affiliations. She's a member of the Rotary Club of Halifax and Calder. She's the past president of the Halifax and District Branch of the Royal Society of St George and currently the secretary, the chairman of Halifax Flower Club, and not many people might know this one, the Calderdale Senior Citizens Orchestra, where she acts as a pianist and a tutor, and a marvellous pianist she is too. So during the course of all this, Geraldine has accumulated a huge amount of local knowledge on a wide range of subjects and is very well versed on council procedures and civic protocols. I think she has an amazing knowledge of those things. And as a leader of a party group, she's an ideal, wonderful councillor to have on anybody's team. And she consistently delivers solutions rather than additional problems. She's, let me just say, forgive this is where I knew I'd get in trouble with the notes. Oh yeah, on a lighter note, I should relate that when I became leader of the Conservative group, I thought I'd better meet with Geraldine to further cement our new relationship. And so I advised her in a very firm, assertive manner the following: Geraldine, don't think I'm not frightened of you, because I am. And with that underlying principle, we developed a relationship that's gone from strength to strength. I know where I stand in relation to Geraldine. And so, in conclusion, I would like to just thank her for everything. It's a remarkable record of public service. And she's a charming, eloquent, we've heard her this evening, and persuasive speaker with a wonderful personality and a great sense of humour. A wife, mother, councillor, and always a lady. She's a one-off, and she will be missed by this council across all political spectrums. And Geraldine, on behalf of everybody, I wish you every good luck in the future. And thank you for your massive contribution to Ripponden, your ward, Ryburn, and Calderdale throughout the boundaries. You're a wonderful person, and we thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lee. And yes, I mean, I think all the councillors who are stepping down this time have a remarkable service, really. You know, to actually put yourself forward as a public servant, as a councillor, is no mean feat in the first place. And the dedication that those who are standing down this time have shown collectively is really quite remarkable, and I am proud to have served alongside every last one of you. And I have indeed witnessed Councillor Carter at the Senior Citizens Orchestra, and it has to be said that concert was an absolute delight. It was such fun, and I hope to be able to go to another. Not as mayor, obviously, but you know, one day when these things are permitted again, it would be lovely to go to another. I think Councillor Blagber, you wanted to say a few words. If you could keep it short, please, because we.
I will keep it very short. I've got a great deal of time for Councillor Carter, and I've served on the council on and off since 2000, so known Geraldine quite a long time. She's a scary character at times, but she knows this stuff, and she's been quite remarkable. Quite a list of things that she's achieved, not to mention the markets, but actually most importantly for me, actually being my deputy when I was the mayor of Calderdale. She was instrumental in helping a lot of things happen that year. She told me what I needed to do, when I needed to do it, and even before I even knew I needed to do it. So she was absolutely remarkable. One of the biggest events she helped to organise that particular year was Yorkshire Day in Halifax, something many memories I will take with me as well. And Geraldine, you will be missed. I hope you've got a few tears. I'm sure you will have, because you deserve to have a few tears, because you've been hardworking, and you will be missed, along with the other councillors, of course. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bellinger. And all that remains for me to say on this item, there is very much more that can be said, but we'll be here all night if we say it all. So I wish you all a very happy retirement from the council, and I hope that you have many happy years as not councillors. Okay, right, let's move on then to item number 4, and thank you all very much for your contributions on that item. It's always good to acknowledge the work that our retiring colleagues have contributed. Okay, so item 4 then, I believe there is a petition from the Liberal Democrat group. Councillor Baker?
Actually, Madam Mayor, I'm going to present it if I may.
Oh, please do, Councillor Evans. That's one thing I forgot to ask at the pre-meeting, so thank you.
And we forgot to mention it, sorry. So our petition is called Fix Our Streets, and all councillors will hear on the doorstep the dreaded phrase, potholes, 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 I'm afraid. And I do have to say that Calderdale's roads are in pretty much a shocking state, one might even say a third world situation. And we're encouraging more cyclists to go out onto the road, and we need that road to be safe for those cyclists to go out. They're very vulnerable with potholes. They can damage cars and other road users, and they generate a lot more noise than a properly metalled road does so it has an effect on residents as well. I do recognise that the government has cut our budget by something nearly 20% on roads, which isn't going to help. But let me just give you a couple of quick examples. Court Lane in my ward, it took us 3 years to get some work done on that, and it was in a dreadful state by the time it was done. 3 months later, it's being repaired. Now, something has to be wrong there. We need to do something like investing in the JCB pothole machines. We need to think about investing to save. And I give highways a fair warning that I've just done a video of Paddock Lane, which is just round the corner, and that is just as bad as Court Lane used to be. So watch out, highways, we're on your case on that one as well. So as far as the petition is concerned, we would like to urge Cabinet to petition the government to restore the cut to Calderdale's highways grant. We cannot do a proper job with the reduced amount. We don't want any more botched jobs. We do need to think about investing in something like the JCB pothole machine. And I will say at this point, I have no shares in JCB. That produces high quality, long lasting repairs. And we need to look into proper investment into our roads. We need a cost analysis to explore if we're borrowing a large capital programme, putting in place that we need to get the money back for it, but we need to invest in order to do it. Places like Stockport local authority have done just that, and have done very well, and in fact kept their costs to a minimum as a result of it. And the people of Stockport have much better roads. So 3 things in the petition. Let's talk to government about the cut in the budget, no more botched jobs, and let's look at investing to save and give us people in Calderdale better roads. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that, Councillor Evans. So that petition, I presume, will be sent to the committee admin team, who will deal with it as they
We send it electronically, Madam Mayor.
Lovely, that's grand. Thank you very much. Okay, item 5 then. There are no, under Council Procedure Rule 12, a question by a member of the public cannot be asked at a meeting of the council during the period from the publication of notice of election for council until polling day. So as we are in Purdah, there are no questions under Rule 12. Item 6 is recommendations of the Cabinet. Now, both the recommendations this evening are exempt. So I propose that we have any discussion about those recommendations at the end of the meeting, so that the live stream can be turned off for that discussion. So we'll move item 6 to the end of the meeting. So don't disappear when we get to item 13, because there's item 6 to follow after. Okay. Right, thank you very much, members. Okay, on to item 7 then, to receive a report from the leader of the council on the work of West Yorkshire Combined Authority. Councillor Tim Swift.
Oh, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. The report has been circulated and I don't have anything to add to the written report at this stage.
Thank you, Councillor Swift. Are there any questions, members? I'm not seeing anybody indicating. Okay then. Right, so we will, as there's nobody indicating that they wish to comment on item 7, we will go on to item 8, to receive reports from the leader and cabinet members on the discharge of their roles and responsibilities since the last meeting of the council. So to start, we'll go to Councillor Tim Swift, please, for your report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. And as the report says, thank you to people who, to Councillor Scullion particularly, who stepped in for me whilst I was off for a couple of weeks, and to colleagues there. So I may need to pass a few more questions than normal to other people during this period as well. I just want to update briefly, because the figures are changing, just on the situation in terms of COVID, just on 2 or 3 things. I think most members will be aware from the regular briefings that there was there was a period as the vaccination rolled out and as lockdown took effect, when the decline in cases in Calderdale seemed to have levelled off, and there was about a week or 10 days really where they seem to be stuck at around 100 cases per 100,000 there or thereabouts. More recently, there's been a very rapid decline, and the latest figures I have, which are not quite the latest verified ones, is that case rate is down to 29 per 100,000. Now that's broadly at the sort of level that it was when we first had some additional restrictions placed on us way back at the end of July, which perhaps gives a scale of how things have changed over that time. The even more important and better news on that is that the rate amongst the over 60s, of course, the people most vulnerable of serious illness or death, is much lower than that. I believe under 10 per 100,000. Also that the uptake of the vaccine has been good, and in particular that the uptake of our care staff, which has been a concern nationally, is now at nearly 75% level, which is close to where we would hope to get it to, although there's still a little bit more progress to be made, but certainly much better than in some parts of the country. Obviously, with the easing of lockdown at the moment, schools are on holiday, but they'll be returning next week. You know, there is a risk that will have an impact, and we will start to see cases rise again, and we'll continue to keep a very close watch on that, and in particular to watch very closely for cases of any of the new variants, which is perhaps the issue that is giving public health the major concern. And of course, once again, I'm sure we all want to say thank you to the NHS and our staff and everybody involved in supporting them for the incredible work that's being done on the rollout of the vaccine. Other than that, Madam Mayor, nothing to add to what's in the written report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Swift, and that's indeed wonderful news about the COVID rates recently. Let's hope they continue to head in a downward direction. You know, it's really is wonderful news. Okay, over to you, Councillor Scullion next, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got nothing to add to my report.
Thank you, Councillor Scullion. Next, Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did mention it in my report, but I just wanted to very briefly just extend my thanks to Councillor Ann Collins, who's stepping down for absolutely everything she's done over many decades for CYP. She's served on pretty much every single committee or panel or forum going. And before she was a councillor, she was an officer of CYP. And as Councillor Swift said, she's worked in our schools as well. So, I really can't stress just what a huge impact she's had on children and young people in this borough over several decades. So thank you very much, Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson, and I echo your remarks. Councillor Metcalfe next, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members will have read in my report, I started it with the listing the very improved situation with regard to COVID-19 cases in care homes. And the report did say that the weekly update shows no current positive cases for residents. I think that is a tremendous situation that care homes, through all the dedication and hard work that's been going on over the pandemic, to be in this position now, which I do say underlines that dedication and effort put in by care homes, by the wide range of key partners, particularly the real support, solid support that the council, adult social care has given to care homes throughout this period. I think that's tremendous news. We do get the weekly updates on these each Friday, so just hope that that trend is now stabilised and we'll see that continuing. Just at the end of my report, I do just mention information regarding people with learning disabilities on annual health checks and health action plans. And I'm really very pleased to see that tomorrow morning there will be an informal health and wellbeing board meeting taking place that's entitled Nothing About Me Without Me. And that's recognising the challenge of inequality for people with learning disabilities. So I think this is going to be a really good session, an informal session of the Health and Wellbeing Board to explore this situation. And hopefully we'll come out with some action plan, which will go to a formal Health and Wellbeing Board in June 2021, this June. It really is now being recognised, the importance regarding people with learning disabilities can live a longer life, and we need to, along with the West Yorkshire and Harrogate Health and Care Partnership, explore this position further, which we will be doing tomorrow morning. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Metcalfe. And that's extremely good news about care home residents and the lack of positive COVID cases of late. That's very, very good news indeed. Next, go to Councillor Patient, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Nothing to add to my report this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patient. Councillor Lynn, please.
Thank you. Nothing to add to my report either, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lynn. And finally, Councillor Dacre, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. All I'd want to add is simply, since it is the end of the council year, a thank you to all those officers in the council who have been so helpful to me since I took over this portfolio in the summer of last year, just in time to start on the future council papers. So it's a very big thanks to them from me.
Thank you, Councillor Dacre. Yes, I think the work of officers, particularly this year, has been really quite outstanding. It's been no mean feat making everything happen on Zoom, as well as or whatever other platform, as well as doing all the background work as well. So yes, it's a very, very good comment. Okay, so we will now take questions to the Cabinet, and first on my list is Councillor Bellinger.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I may, just to start with, I'd just like to thank, as Chair of Strategy and Performance, my Scrutiny Board for the support they've given throughout this year, and to officers as well for the support they've given the board throughout this previous year. My question is to Councillor Patient. As councillors, we regularly campaign for improvements to our wards. We listen to our constituents with what matters to them, and we look at ways in which we can improve our environment, which makes our wards healthier places to live. Air pollution is the top environmental risk to human health in the UK and the fourth greatest threat to public health after cancer, heart disease and obesity. I mean, this may have actually dropped now due to the coronavirus. Poor air quality makes us more susceptible to respiratory infections and other illnesses. This is why we have to make vast improvements to our air quality. To make improvements, we need to establish where our hotspots are for poor air quality. And at the moment in Calderdale, we only have 8 declared air quality management areas, West Vale not being one of them. This particular part of my ward, set down in the valley bottom, sees a high volume of traffic, more so when the M62 is closed for any reason. Down in the valley bottom, pollutants are trapped sometimes, depending on the atmospherics at that particular point. Also in that area, we have 2 schools that are actually on the roadside. We have 3 care homes and accommodation for independent living, with residents in these places probably more susceptible to respiratory conditions from poor air quality. The local plan proposes a considerable amount of properties to be built in Greetland, which would result in increased vehicular movement throughout the ward, which would increase particulate matter and nitrogen oxide levels to our environment. I have asked now on numerous occasions over the past 3 years for this part of my ward to be added to the air quality management area, or at least be assessed through testing. Unfortunately, nothing has materialised from these requests. So with this in mind, I therefore ask that West Vale is included in any future air quality testing and is brought in line with the rest of Calderdale for any improvements to mitigate against any poor air quality. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Bellinger. Councillor Swift, who would you like to nominate to answer that question?
Quite happy for Councillor Patient to respond, Madam Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Patient.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Bellinger, for that question. Clearly, yeah, our AQMAs are under constant review in terms of how they do and don't work. I'm very sorry to hear that perhaps you haven't had the expediency of West Vale being looked at in the sense that you've needed it. Just to let you be aware slightly of the challenges of over the last year. Obviously, monitoring throughout COVID has been difficult and problematic because the monitoring hasn't been in usual times. There's been dips when there's been no traffic around at all, and there's big peaks as soon as cars have returned to the road again. So that's proved quite challenging in around our current AQMA areas. What we've decided in that time, while we've been gathering our thoughts, is to rethink how the air quality strategy group works, and to think about its governance. And we've come up with an idea which I think makes sense, which is splitting it into a strategic and an operational sense of the works, because I think our now retired officer, Tommy Morehouse, who's sadly left us, was an absolutely brilliant air quality management officer, but sadly he was doing a lot of monitoring at the same time as also managing that quite strategic work. So we do have a plan going forward in terms of looking at our AQMA sites. Sadly, we've not quite yet hired a replacement for Tommy. Finding someone with that particular skill set is a challenge in itself in the public sector. So as soon as we have someone in place, that will really help us to look at those other places that are perhaps worthy of an AQMA site. So I can't promise you it's going to happen overnight, because I think we need to get that person in post. But I can promise you that air quality as a strategic priority is very much there. And please do get in touch with me via email, and we can follow this up post this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patient. Really appreciate that.
Thank you for your answer, your response, Councillor Patient. Okay, now before we go on to Councillor Robinson, who is next on my list, I just want to ask, Councillor Lee, your hand is raised. Are you wishing to ask a question on this item?
I'm wishing to ask a question of Councillor Swift.
Okay, right, thank you. We'll add you to the list then. Thank you very much for clarifying. Over to you then, Councillor Robinson. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and thank you to all members as well for the fitting tributes earlier on in the session. Madam Mayor, I've got a bit of a shopping list, may I say. Do you know, Madam Mayor, who I love? I love driving instructors. They are the gatekeepers of safe driving across Calderdale. Now, I've received many emails from driving instructors about grant funding. And Madam Mayor, I'd like to ask whether the Cabinet would consider providing driving instructors a grant funding stream as part of the ARG grant system to provide driving instructors a specific grant funding scheme so driving instructors can carry on their good work across Calderdale. The Calderdale Council have the ability to do this. It's a discretionary pot, and I think this would be quite adequate for them. The other point on the ARG funding, which I'd like to ask, is at the moment self-employed income support scheme entitlement is a bar. It's a restriction to ARG grant funding. This is not a government requirement. I'd like to ask Calderdale Council to remove this restriction. And also, Madam Mayor, as of the 26th of March, the council had only spent £431,000 in ARG grant funding, despite being awarded £4.2 million from the government. Now, this is indeed a national problem with other local authorities as well. But can we please hurry up and get this funding to businesses which desperately require this funding? Final point from me, Madam Mayor, is I still haven't had a response from my last question at the last full council meeting about Calderdale Council's ARG awards in comparison to other local authorities. The fact that Calderdale Council's ARG awards is lower. Please could I chase a response as well, Madam Mayor? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Okay, Councillor Swift, who would you like to take this one?
I think probably Councillor Scullion's best place to respond to that one. I recognise some of the issues as being under active debate.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Robinson is correct that driving instructors, amongst other groups, I must emphasise, have made the case in terms of ARG payments. There has been some discussion across different councils in terms of the approach, particularly in terms of, as he says, the self-employment scheme. ARG was, of course, meant to be in some ways a payment of last resort for those who weren't eligible for other schemes, and that's what we have prioritised. But his question is very timely because we are reviewing Nigel Broadbent, Fiona Thurlbeck and other relevant officers. We are actually reviewing that very question. So thank you for that. In terms of chasing the response, I'm terribly sorry, actually, that you didn't get a response with the numbers from the last council meeting. I don't know what happened to that. It obviously fell between the cracks. The officers have been very busy getting the money out of the door. I have actually, I'm not sure I can pull it up because there are so many different, just under £1 million has gone out in terms of the additional restriction grants so far, and that continues. And of course, the new grants, the new round, as it were, is due to be publicised tomorrow. There are, as you know, a great many different varieties of these grants that the officers are having to work on, and indeed that means that they are currently not necessarily attending to their other jobs in finance. So it has been real stress and strain on the staff, and we have really, I think we really all owe them thanks for what they have done. But I will take the specific point about the driving instructors up, and I will also chase that further response. Thank you, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you very much, Councillor Scullion. Next on my list, I have Councillor Whitaker, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe my question is directed at Councillor Scullion as well. Mine's in relation to the Restart Grant Scheme, which is opening up tomorrow. It's been made available by the government to help businesses, particularly those in the hospitality, accommodation, leisure, personal care and gym sectors, reopen safely as the COVID-19 restrictions are lifted. These grants were made available on the 1st of April, and as colleagues know, these businesses could reopen from Monday this week. Calderdale Council's application process opens tomorrow, meaning that many businesses have reopened without this vital support in place. Can Councillor Scullion advise why the council are opening the grant application process from tomorrow when other councils, such as our neighbours in Kirklees and Leeds, for instance, have opened theirs much sooner? And can you also assure eligible businesses that there will be sufficient provision in place to ensure that businesses are not waiting months to receive payments like the last round of grants? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Whitaker. Councillor Scullion, please.
Thank you, and thank you to Councillor Whitaker for the question. It's an anxiety that we all have, and we really want to see the hospitality industry in particular and other associated industries really get a good restart. We were actually slower in terms of setting up the scheme because we hope, and tomorrow will tell, that we actually have set it up so that it is easier for businesses rather than having to come back and provide lots of further information. We actually think it's better than many of the neighbouring businesses where there's going to be lots and lots of toing and froing in terms of paperwork. We actually think that this will be much more efficient in getting the money out there than some of our neighbours. The proof is in the pudding, and we will do our absolute best to make sure that that money starts flying out of the door as soon as we possibly can. But we have learned the lessons from previous iterations of these previous grants, where we were constantly having to come back to businesses asking them for further information. We think the way we've set it up, it's one size fits all circumstances, and we'll get the right information up front, and we'll be able to pay out those grants as soon as we possibly can.
Thank you, Councillor Scullion. That's really helpful.
Thank you very much for your response, Councillor Scullion, and for your question, Councillor Whitaker. Next on my list, I have Councillor Hutchinson, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm afraid my question is also directed towards Councillor Scullion too. Within the NHS, a lot of government funding comes in discrete packages with strings attached, for which specific bids have to be submitted in competition with other bodies, usually with unrealistically short deadlines. Success depends on having a range of projects on the shelf which can be dusted off whenever possible funding is announced. I believe a similar piecemeal approach to local authority funding is quite prominent. How well does this actually work in Calderdale, and what impact does it have on the budget setting process?
Thank you, Councillor Hutchinson. Councillor Scullion again.
Thank you, Councillor Hutchinson. I would very much like to see us go back to the days when we had decent settlement for local government and 3-year settlements so that we could plan. Oh, I so much would like those days to be back.
Oh dear. We appear to have lost Councillor Scullion.
Madam Mayor, perhaps whilst Jane's internet is Councillor Scullion's Councillor Scullion's now.
Are you back with us, Councillor Scullion?
Oh, apologies. It didn't even tell me I was gone.
You froze a minute or so ago.
I was getting nostalgic for the days when we did meetings on Zoom for the old Yorkshire Forward scheme, where money actually came through regionally and actually addressed the problems of a place. I think the situation we've got at the moment, Councillor Hutchinson is absolutely right, is that we are driven spare by the bidding system. And I think it's like a beauty contest. Actually, we are bidding against other councils who've got equally good claims on improvements that they want to have in their district. And some of the deadlines are very, very short in terms of having shovel-ready schemes. and we have no guarantee of success. We have been very successful in the past in terms of getting capital schemes, but it actually is tying up enormous amount of staff time, and we are competing in terms of other resources with other councils. I think it's a very poor way to run financial system for local government, really. But we rest assured we are doing our best within the beauty contests that there are at the moment.
Good luck with winning a sash.
Thank you, Councillor Scullion and Councillor Hutchinson, for your question. Next, I have Councillor Baker, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And actually, Councillor Robinson beat me to my first question that I was going to ask. And so thank you for raising that about the driving instructors. I think it's an important issue. We do need to try and ensure there's some consistency across West Yorkshire as well. We don't end up with a kind of postcode lottery system where some people, by chance of where they're born, aren't entitled to funding, but they get another authority. The other question I really wanted to ask was around some of the kind of poor quality state of housing in Calderdale at the moment, and what we're going to do to try and improve it, and also try and drive up some of the standards among some of the social housing providers in the borough. We're lucky recently, there was a project by Together Housing to improve the damp issue in some of the properties that are in the Pennon area, which are affected by damp problems. But sadly, those kind of damp problems affect so many other social housing and privately rented properties in Calderdale. And when you go and see some of the conditions that people have to live in, it is really pretty shocking. I mean, I've seen, I've walked into rooms, I've seen kids have to sleep on a mattress in a room with like black mold on the wall. And this is a social housing house, it should be up to a decent fit standard for people to live in. So I really just kind of asking a question there around the kind of housing, and there's the issue of building new housing. This is what we do to get the existing houses up to a kind of fit level, so that everyone can live in a home with a kind of basic standard.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Councillor Swift, who would you like to answer this one?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will mainly go to Councillor Scullion. We'll just make two observations. I mean, sorry, to Councillor Patient. Just make two quick observations. I think it is important people recognise that the Conservative government post 2015 implemented a policy of reducing council house rents, which was short-term popularity with tenants. But the effects of that was that it massively squeezed housing associations' budgets and did cause some significant reductions in their improvement programs. That, however, does not justify them having homes in their ownership which are unfit and damp, and they do need to make sure they're prioritising the right areas of works. I mean, in terms of new house building, the most important thing right now is to get through all the stages of the local plan, and to recognise that building new homes is not just about meeting increased demand, but is also about enabling that movement amongst the existing housing stock, which is critical to bringing new owners in and often raises standards as well. But I'll ask Councillor Patient to extend on that.
No, thank you, Councillor Smith. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Baker, for the question. Councillor Swift's covered some of the more substantive issues around there, but I think going forward is really important to recognise the strength of the Calderdale Together Housing Investment Panel, and actually the wider work with our registered providers in tackling some of these issues. I think actually making sure that they're flagged straight away is a really important thing for us, so we can identify where the problems and the gaps lie. I think what's also important, building on the local plan stuff, is the fact that we're working with a number of housing providers, including housing associations, to identify new opportunities and ensure that those schemes are brought forward as soon as possible. I'm sure you're aware of some of the sites that are already there in the pipeline, Beach Hill and Titan Works, and the list goes on. But clearly, yeah, there are issues in terms of despite what has been going on with funding for housing and social housing, we do have a role to play in protecting that. And I think what's important going forward is that the investment panel and the work with our IPs identifies those issues straight. So if you are aware of anything, please do flag them to me, and make sure that the relevant officers are aware, and we'll make sure that they're actioned as soon as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Patient. Councillor Lynn, you wanted to comment on this question.
Yes, just briefly, and thank you very much, Councillor Baker, for that question. Certainly, I know from my own casework in relation to my own ward in Park Ward, that periodically I'm faced with some really quite difficult situations that families are experiencing because of just what you're talking about, you know, damp, cold houses, central heating not working, and so on. But I just wanted to actually pay tribute to the environmental health team that sit within public services, for which I have responsibility, because I know just this week they were out and about. Sometimes it's quite hard for tenants in the private sector, private rented sector, to persuade them to call in environmental health where landlords are refusing to carry out repairs. There is protection in place in terms of protection against eviction in those circumstances, but people are sometimes quite wary. But I'd like to commend the sensitive way in which our environmental health officers deal with that, really. And just one final point, really. Again, I'm mentioning the private rented sector, and there's already been some discussion about our social housing providers. But as far as the private rented sector is concerned, I'd just like to give a shout out to a scheme which one of our leading social enterprises in Calderdale, Halifax Opportunities Trust, is about to launch, which is basically targeting private landlords, particularly in central flats, who might like to take advantage of a kind of social agency that would take over supporting and running their rented properties for them, with a view, and that's specifically with a view to driving up the standards in the private rented sector. But I share Councillor Baker's concern about this. I think there's a long way to go in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Lynn. Next, I have Councillor Carter, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question, I'm not sure who the leader would like to answer it. It relates to the environmental permit that was issued to Calderdale Skip Hire in February, from the cabinet meeting in February. And I felt that I shouldn't let my last meeting go by without this thorn in my side since 2006 being mentioned by me. I think the local people were quite disappointed at the end of that meeting and the outcome. Not that you actually granted the permit, because I guess it's very difficult not to grant the permit, but I think what local residents are more concerned about is the lack of appreciation we felt that there should be put in place a monitoring scheme that is open and transparent. Within the European rules on incinerators, there is a clause in there that does allow a monitoring scheme to be put in rather than it being a ad hoc one. And I think with the comments that have been made at the inquiry and the inspector realising how important this is for the people who live locally, and as Councillor Bellinger has mentioned, the air quality issues of the A58 and Sober Bridge are just horrendous. And I think if at all possible, my final plea would be, could we please have a look at that again and look at all that legislation within that European documentation. I know it's not an easy one to pick up. I did try in my humble way to read it and hopefully pick bits out of it. And it is a difficult document, I do understand that. But I'm sure if the residents felt that there was a programme of monitoring that they could see, that was open and transparent, they would feel a lot more content with the way that it goes forward. So I'm not sure who that question really wants to fall to. I know it's a difficult one, but thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor
Carter. Sorry, Madam Mayor. I should have
Please go ahead, Councillor Swift.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. I think Councillor Lynn's probably best placed to respond to that.
Yes, thank you very much for your question, Councillor Carter. And I know we're very well aware of how disappointed many residents were about the actual granting of the permit, over which we really have no control. But I'm pleased to be able to say that there is a comprehensive monitoring plan which has been devised and put in place. I will check with officers about the reference that you've made to the EU scheme, which may be different from the system that we've put in place. And we have recently been asked by the group that led the opposition to the incinerator, that's the Benbow group. We've been asked to provide them with a copy of that plan, which we have done so, and which will in due course, we hope it'll go up on our website anyway, so that people can see the processes that are to be followed in relation to that. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your response, Councillor.
Madam Mayor, can I just
very briefly? You're on mute, Councillor Carter.
Thank you,
As it's your
Councillor.
last meeting, I'll let you come back very briefly.
Thank you. Thank you for letting the Benbow group know. But, you know, it would have been quite useful, really, if what councillors had been made aware of it. Because if we don't know, then we can't possibly do our job as it's supposed to be done if we aren't being advised of that, of something so important as that monitoring procedure. And all this stuff is under it. It's an EU document that the government have also taken on board. So it is the same document. It is the same standards.
Okay. Right. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Carter. Next on my list, I have Councillor Fenton Glynn, please.
Excuse me, sorry. This one, I think, is to Councillor Wilkinson. I recently read that a number of councils have lost out because of the government's decision to move forward the eligibility date for the pupil premium. I'm just wondering if that applies to Calderdale Council, and if so, how much some of our most vulnerable young people in our schools are missing out on.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Fenton Glynn. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Fenton Glynn, for the question. Yeah, for those that are not familiar with this, the government have basically moved the goalposts so that pupil premium funding that schools receive will be based on which children received free school meals back in October rather than in January, as it would normally have been. And nationally, that's going to mean £155 million worth of funding being lost by schools. So I had picked up on that, and I had asked officers to look into how we would be affected here in Calderdale. And they've managed to tell me that schools are going to be losing £540,000 worth of funding for disadvantaged children, which is obviously going to be really negatively impacting those schools. I am aware, obviously, that the government has provided some extra funding to education in terms of like the catch-up plan and holiday funding, etc. But with this move, they're basically giving with one hand and taking away with another. And I know that both MPs from Calderdale have actually written to the Education Secretary to raise this issue. So I have asked officers as well to look into how individual schools will be affected, because, you know, obviously it's going to be those in the most disadvantaged areas with the most children on preschool meals that are probably going to be disproportionately affected. So this is another example, I'm afraid, of the government having the wrong priorities and failing our disadvantaged children. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Next on my list, Councillor Audrey Smith, please.
Thanks. I wanted to find out if what we know about the long COVID recovery centres that have been set up by the government. I understand there's 18 across the North East and Yorkshire, but many, it says in a Which report that many of them remain, they're not all open, and some have had to stop accepting referrals due to long waiting lists. And I just wonder if we have any idea about the support that Calderdale residents with long COVID are being offered, because this has a huge impact on the workforce 1 in 5 people that suffer with COVID go on to have symptoms that can last up to 5 weeks or more, and 1 in 10 have symptoms that go on to last 12 weeks or more. And these are multiple and can vary across individuals, and these centres are meant to offer holistic support, which in principle is a great idea, but as it says in the report that I've read, that they're just not, you know, people can't access them. I just wondered if you had any information on that.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Smith. Councillor Swift, would you like to nominate somebody to reply?
Oh, I think that one probably comes to me, Madam Mayor. Yeah, so we absolutely recognise that the impacts of long COVID is is important. It's going to be a significant health issue for many people. I think it's important to say that it's not just about the centres that are being talked about, which I think are particularly for people with quite extreme and long continuing conditions. Part of this is making sure that GPs and other health professionals are aware of the various forms in which this is starting to take, and you'll understand this is still an emerging picture really of what some of these impacts will be. So it's about making sure that all health professionals understand that there are long-term implications first of all and respond appropriately to that. There is work going on between council services, primary care colleagues and other agencies about what the pathway as a whole should be from primary care to the specialist centres. So that's about making sure people can identify the signs and symptoms, and then offering clinic support where appropriate, triaging people to the best sources of support, which in some cases may be long-term support in terms of counselling or voluntary sector assistance as well as health requirements. So it is part of a wider picture. Do recognise the interests in that, and I'll make sure, Councillor Smith, that you get a more detailed response specifically about the centres as well to that, and appreciate that may be something other members are interested in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Swift. Next on my list, I have Councillor Blackburn, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Last night I attended a meeting over Zoom with a group of residents in Brighouse who are forming to put forward an expression of interest in the Brighouse Civic Hall, which fully supports this particular group. They want this to work for the long term and not the short term. The difficulty and the question they wanted me to raise, which I agree to do so, is really to encourage and if possible give some indication as to when, if we can possibly open the Brighouse Civic Hall back open again, because actually one of their issues is actually they're wanting to find out post-COVID times as to how much income this could actually potentially generate. I know they've got some extremely exciting plans in place. I'm going to put forward a few different varieties of business plans which they really do want to work long term, and equally potentially looking at a potential short-term lease just to ensure that actually the long term of the building continues. So that's part of my question. I guess it's to Councillor Link. She's been most helpful in coming to meetings and taking on board some of my comments. The other comment is really equally pushing for when we can see Customer First re-establish in Brighouse as a physical centre. A lot of people, we think that we rely on technology. A lot of people cannot use technology and they need face-to-face help and assistance, especially in these challenging times. So thank you, Madam Mayor, for your time, as always.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Councillor Lynn, to start with.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, and thank you very much, Councillor Blackburn, for all the work and time which you've put in supporting residents in Brighouse who are interested in the future of the Civic Hall. I know I am aware that officer colleagues are in discussion with various people about these issues, and I'm quite sure that work will be progressing in the coming weeks. We did ask for expressions of interest to be in by the end of March, but I realised that there were issues specifically in relation to Brighouse Civic Hall, which may possibly have affected the timescale on that. So I'm sure that officer colleagues will be taking a look at that, and we'll note what you've said really. As far as the issue about short-term and long-term leases is concerned, I think that is more complicated. But as I say, Brighouse Civic Hall it's quite complicated in terms of the arrangement of the building and so on, and also the range of interests that there is in that. So I'd like to actually pay tribute to colleagues in CAFM, in the Community Assets Facilities Management section, Steve Hoyle and the team, who've been working very hard with this. So yes, I'm quite sure that we will be taking a look at that. Now, the other aspect that you mentioned, which is also within my portfolio, public services, which is when can we have an in-person presence of Customer First in Brighouse? Obviously, this depends upon the government regulations and the government roadmap, but I can assure you that we are committed to ensuring that there will be a Customer First facility available in Brighouse, and a number of options are being considered as far as suitable locations for that. So thank you for your question, Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lynn. Councillor Smith, you wanted to ask a follow-up question. Sorry if I missed this at the time when you put that up, but please do. Councillor Audrey Smith, you wanted to ask a follow-up question.
Yeah, it was really just about the point. These clinics, they also offer support around welfare and benefits and things like that people will need if they're off sick for about 12 weeks or more. And I just wondered, you know, those sort of aspects worry me in a joined up approach for maybe people that aren't quite as seriously ill as the ones that you mentioned. And I think my battery's going to die.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Swift.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I appreciate that point, and obviously that's also true of you know, of many people with long-term conditions. And I think one of the ambitions around the work with neighbourhood work as part of Calderdale Cares and primary care networks is to make sure that primary care in particular is much better connected to community groups and advice services, so that when those issues arise, whether it's long COVID or other conditions, you know, they do know where to signpost people for help quickly. I think one or two of our GP practices are starting to do some really good work about that, but you know, the challenge is how we work with them and support them to get everybody to that position.
Thank you very much, Councillor Swift. Next, Councillor Dickinson, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As part of our plans to become the best borough in the north, surely we should be, as the time-honoured message reads, be recording calls for training and monitoring purposes. If I can put some flesh on the bones to this, a resident has complained to me on 2 occasions now about poor customer service. Most recently being with regard to the free school meals over the Easter break, and was at some point during the course of the conversation allegedly told that, well, if it weren't for COVID, you wouldn't be getting this money. Now, this is merely an allegation, unsubstantiated by any evidence that would have been available had the phone call been recorded. And it's as much to do with getting to the root of that and identifying a training need, as it is also for the fact of having to avoid a situation where the managers are having to write to me with an abject apology on the basis of an unevidenced allegation. And it's as much to protect those managers from having to do that sort of a thing as anything else. That prompts me to ask the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Councillor Swift, who would you like to answer?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think customer service probably either Councillor Dacre or perhaps Councillor Lynn. Yeah.
Councillor Lynn, do go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much for your question, and I'm very sorry to hear that of the alleged poor quality of service, because I would like to say that you know, on the whole, I've got the highest regard for people who work in our customer first call call centre service. Although we have experienced really much a big increase in calls, as I've detailed in my report, nonetheless, there's never any excuse for such as has been alleged. I'll certainly take back your suggestion, your query about whether calls are recorded. And as you know, we have a complaint system, and I would hope that any member that has a constituent that comes across with a complaint for any aspect of our council services would actually, if it's considered substantiated, would actually encourage them to submit a formal complaint, because we do have a complaints procedure, and the whole point. And we also have a compliments procedure. And I would like to say that so those of you who see the public services updates which are sent round on a weekly basis will note that one of the things that we've been doing recently is that we have been actually highlighting some of the comments that we've received, and the very complimentary comments that we've received from people who really appreciated the sensitive way in which they were dealt with, despite having been quite nervous about making the call. So I'm not making light of what you've said, and I'm quite sure that if you send us details, that will be taken up. But I just wanted to put on record my appreciation for the work of the staff in Customer First, and also to pass on the fact that we do get many expressions of appreciation and compliments for the way in which the public feel that they've been dealt with by those same staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lynn. Next on my list, I have Councillor Evans, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To a certain extent, my question's been superseded by that which Councillor Robertson brought up. It relates to ARG, whereas his question was about driving instructors. Mine relates to independent hairdressers, which are very important at the moment, as you will note by the length of my own hair. We were told when looking for ARG grants that these had finished, but I do believe that some more are being put in their place. So really, I'm just urging for that to be put in motion so that people like driving instructors and independent hairdressers can benefit from this particular thing. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Evans. Councillor Scullion.
Thank you for that. Your hair looks lovely, Councillor Evans, in spite of the lack of barbers and hairdressers. I've noted the point in there have been other schemes that they could have taken advantage of, but it does depend on the particular circumstances. And you're right that mobile hairdressers have had a particular difficulty, and likewise barbers. I made a note of that and added into the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scullion. Next, I have Councillor Lee, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is actually for Councillor Scullion, not Councillor Swift. I wanted to mention to Councillor Swift earlier that I think that some of the things that have been allowed at this meeting tonight are not within the spirit of PERDA. But I have a question for Councillor. In your report, Councillor Scullion, under planning, building and building control, you have a comment which goes as follows. The local plan has continued its path towards the third and hopefully final set of hearings after the local elections. My question is this: there were some 180 or so queries from the inspector asking for tasks to be performed by the council prior to the meetings going ahead for the next phase. Could Councillor Scullion please provide an update on the progress being made with this? For example, is the number down to less than 100 yet? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Scullion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The team have been working flat out on this, and I'm afraid I can't actually give you a number. As they complete particular pieces of work, it is actually posted on the local plan website, and that will give you an up-to-date figure in terms of things that are completed and are reported to the inspector and put on the website. I'm sorry, I can't tell you exactly what the number is, but we are confident actually that we will get through them all. Many of the smaller ones were done fairly quickly early on, leaving the more complex ones to be done. But I am confident, and the team are very confident, that they will get through them.
Thank you, Councillor Scullion. And last on my list at the moment, Councillor Baines, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question goes back to the comment which Councillor Evans made regarding potholes earlier in the meeting. And I just want to ask, how the council spent the funds the money that we received from the potholes funds, which was £2,466,810, and for the road maintenance upgrade and to tackle potholes of £2,734,000, a total of just over £5.2 million. Could I have a breakdown of where that money was spent, please?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Baines. Councillor Swift.
Thank you. I think I'll refer that to Councillor Scullion, and I think Councillor Lynn wants to comment on it as well. So Councillor Scullion first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Swift. I haven't actually got a full detailed breakdown at my fingertips. I have got some general figures in terms of the capital and the revenue. And of course, at the moment, highways is split in terms of the strategic capital projects and the highways maintenance day-to-day work, which Councillor Lynn, there's a team in her directorate. There are really quite a number of detailed figures to give you, and I will provide you with a full written response in relation to that. But I know that last year we spent on classified road resurfacing £3,285,000, unclassified roads resurfacing £3,514,000, surface dressing programme £1,586,000. And that includes the capital pothole budget spend of £1,313,000. We also use some of the money to carry out a full invasive survey of our 7 post-tension bridge structures, which include Burdock Way and King's Cross at a cost of approximately £430,000. That was something that caused me sleepless nights, really, in terms of, like many authorities, a number of overpasses and older bridges and bypass type roads. And I'm really pleased to say there's good news in terms of the surveys that we've done, that there are no major concerns in relation to those big roads like Burdock Way. However, I should also mention, and we're very grateful for the money that we've had in relation to roads and potholes, but our highway maintenance block allocation is actually going to be reduced by 1.37 million for this forthcoming year. But I will give Councillor Baines a full detailed written response to his query in terms of a detailed breakdown.
Thank you very much for your response, Councillor Scullion, and for your question, Councillor Baines. We have 10 minutes left on this item if anybody else wants to ask a question that hasn't yet. I can't remember the last time we actually had any time left on this item without running out of time for members to ask questions. So if you do want to ask a question, please do. Just let me know. And if not, then we will go to the break that is scheduled in the meeting report and come back in 15 minutes. So does anybody else want to ask a question? It's never happened before. First, Councillor Dickinson, you want to ask us another?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. as it were, it's a supplementary to Councillor Lee's question with regard to the local plan, so therefore it falls to Councillor Scullion again, I'm afraid. A lot of the problems that were facing the stage 2 hearings had to do with the late delivery of pieces of work, which gave not enough time for interested parties to offer commentary and criticism of those. Are you able to give assurance that this won't be the case ahead of the stage 3 hearings, please, Councillor Scullion?
Thank you. And I'm just racking my brain to recollect an exchange in relation to this previously. Can I provide you with, I mean, yes, in terms of as much assurance as I can possibly give you in relation to some of these pieces of work, and we will get them as early as we possibly can. I think there were particular reasons why some documents were delayed, but really the ideal, you're absolutely right, is to give the democratic process as much space and time as possible in terms of getting them up there for people to be able to be consulted. I will provide you with a written response, though, in relation to those specific points that you've raised. Thank you, Councillor Dickinson.
Thank you, Councillor Scullion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Scullion. Okay, and Councillor Blackburn is coming, wanting to ask.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's really kind of you. I'm sorry to come back on another question, but my question is quite important because it inundated with quite a large number of emails, and this relates to the repairs to Park Road from Elland to Brickhouse. So I'm sorry to be the bane of your lives, but actually I want to know when it's going to be started, when it's going to be completed, and because actually that's one of my say main some of the main inbox, because actually things should have started reopening. The roads are starting to get busier. It is a major concern. So thank you, Madam Mayor, for obliging.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Councillor Swift.
Thank you. I think probably Councillor Scullion has the up-to-date dates. I think I know them, but
Councillor Scullion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We are basically expecting initial ground clearance work, etc., to preparation works to start very shortly, the middle of this month. So they should be starting any day, and the work is expected to take 16 weeks, all things being equal. Obviously COVID, other problems, and we cannot wait, really. We did actually really work hard to get funding for this. It was rather delayed. I mentioned before the beauty contests and the bidding contests that you have to go in for in order to get funding for what I would consider to be absolutely essential work. And we are so happy that we're finally got to the point where actually the work starts, hopefully in 16 weeks. We will be seeing people driving buses, whatever, going along that road. We absolutely can't wait. It's an absolutely crucial road for the borough, and it's been very, very difficult. We have recently been doing some inspections at the other end of the road, but I'm pleased to say that they have all been fine, and we just cannot wait to see that road opened again and to see the communities of Brickhouse and Elland properly connected up again. It's been very hard for everyone.
Thank you, thank you, Councillor Scullion. Councillor Bellinger, you have a quick question.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got a similar situation really with regards. It's not actually fully closed, isn't the road, but it has a two-way traffic light system in place because I think there's been some sort of collapse in the road, which is Rochdale Road or Long Wall, it's called, from West Vale to Elland. Again, I'm receiving quite a number of complaints from constituents as to how long this is going to be before it's repaired. I have put a request into Highways. I received a response asking me what particular road it was, but nobody else has actually come back with any concrete answers really as to what's actually happening, when it's going to happen and when it's going to be completed. So again, a similar situation, if I could ask for some answers really as to the repairs on this particular stretch of road. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Bellinger. Councillor Scullion, are you okay to answer that one?
Thank you. I will take that up. Clearly, where we have to put roads under traffic management is for either the safety in terms of making sure that the road doesn't doesn't collapse or make things worse. If it's under traffic management, we try and reduce the time that it's under traffic management as much as possible. But clearly being under traffic management is better than being closed. Being closed is worse, being under traffic management is next worst, and so on. But I will chase that particular one up. I know the one that you mean, and the reasons and some of the disputes that are behind that. So I will actually follow that up for you, Councillor Bellinger. Thank you for raising it.
Thank you, Councillor Scully.
Thank you all very much for your questions this evening. That concludes this item. So we have had the full hour. I thought we might be just short of the full hour, but that would have been a first time for everything, I suppose. So we will now have a 15-minute break for you all to replenish your mugs of tea or whatever else you need to do in that time. And we will reconvene at 8:10, please, members. See you shortly. Thank you very much indeed. Okay then, members, I make it 10 past. So let us resume the meeting. And thank you for your forbearance so far. Okay, so item 9 is to appoint members and substitute members as necessary to serve on scrutiny boards and panels and council committees. I'm not aware of any appointments at this stage, given that we are just before an election. Can you confirm that that is the case, please, Ian?
My apologies, Madam Mayor. I was just dealing with the motion issue. I didn't quite catch what you had to say then. Would you mind repeating that?
Sorry, Ian. You're somewhat multitasking at the moment. I appreciate. So that there are no members to appoint substitute members or substitutes for scrutiny boards or panels, are there, for this meeting?
No, Madam Mayor, that's right.
Wonderful, thank you. And item 10 then, to appoint representatives on outside bodies. Again, I'm not aware of anybody needing to be appointed at that stage.
That's correct, Madam Mayor, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Okay, so item 11 then is to answer questions asked by members of the council under Council Procedure Rule 13. There are 2, I believe. And if I can find the email that says who it is that's on them, both from Liberal Democrats, I think. Councillor Evans and Councillor Baker, is that correct?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I've had the written reply, so shall we kind of read them out and read the replies out for the benefit of everyone else? Is that your intention?
Yes, yes, if you like, yes.
Okay, so we've got it on the record, haven't we? So my question was to Councillor Dacre, and it was around the key performance issues, because I can't remember the exact percentage now off the top of my head. I think it was around 26%, roughly around a kind of quarter of the key performance indicators was shown with green, with about, I think, almost kind of as many red, as many amber, then there's some grey ones where we couldn't actually kind of regulate them properly, and to me that seemed like it wasn't a very high number green, and that we ought to be kind of striving to do kind of a bit better on some of the targets we've set ourselves. So I just wondered what the plans were to improve that situation.
Okay, if I come in then.
Yes, please do, Councillor Dacre.
Yes, well, I have provided the written response. I don't know if it's really expected that I would go through every point that I've put in there, or whether you just want me to summarise from those points, Councillor Baker. I'm not sure that we...
A summary would be perfect.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, summary.
So, well, the first point I'd make is you refer to 26%, and I'd simply say that the key performance indicators are extremely dynamic. So by the time I looked at them, when I was dealing with answering this question, that figure had gone down, and it changes all the time. I'd also just say that I do welcome the question, because our KPIs are public. Obviously, you've looked at them. Everybody else can look at them on the Calderdale DataWorks, and we do welcome challenge to ensure that we can help continuously improve our performance. And what I would say is that when you would want to be worried was when actually we were green for nearly all our performance indicators, because that would suggest that the indicators had been chosen with a view to ensuring that we could easily succeed in meeting them and they would not be sufficiently challenging. So I would suggest that it does show that we are trying to ensure that we are not giving ourselves an easy ride. Then I would also, as you've noted, Councillor Baker, at the moment about 30% of the indicators can't actually be benchmarked for various reasons. So they may, when they can be benchmarked, be green, but just at the moment they're not marked at all, and it's quite a high proportion. And finally, there's over 100 KPIs, key performance indicators. I haven't in the answer, and I couldn't possibly now go through how each performance indicator is going to be dealt with and what plans there are for improving performance on it. But what I can say, and what I can reassure members of the public about, is that the council has a formal reporting structure about its KPIs. They go to the corporate leadership team routinely, they go to cabinet, and they go to scrutiny when exception reports are provided for them on certain of the KPIs. So there's a structure there to ensure that they are not overlooked, and also there is a performance team who are watching them all the time, and if there's an area of concern, they don't just wait for the reporting to come round, they will raise that with the directorate, and steps can then be taken to see how to take action to improve on a risk in the performance there. So whilst, as I say, I haven't set out individual plans because they're changing, there's so many of them and they change all the time, I'd like to reassure everybody that there is a system in place to ensure that they are looked at and kept on top of all the time.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Dacre. And the other question under Rule 13 is from Councillor Bellinger, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. This is for Councillor Scullion. It's do you accept that housing supply in Calderdale is failing to meet demand, and that possible contributing factors to this are the lack of resources and current staffing levels within the council's planning department? If you accept there is room for improvement within this department, what actions do you intend to take to make these improvements? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bellinger. Councillor Scullion, would you like to summarise your response?
Thank you. The question I would like to pass on to Councillor Patient in terms of housing. I'm very happy to add in something in relation to the planning department, but Councillor Patient took over the housing portfolio, I think it was last summer, certainly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Scullion. Yeah, just to reiterate that I obviously haven't made my mark just yet on the housing portfolio, but just to reiterate to members, that is within my portfolio these days. So yeah, thank you for your question, Councillor Bellinger. Clearly, over the last 3 years, the level of housing has fallen short. I think there's a lot of various factors that have contributed to that, not least an insufficient supply of deliverable housing sites. There have been challenges this last 12 months due to COVID, but good progress has been made towards getting the local plan through, as referenced earlier. We are mindful though, and I think we're all acutely aware that the local plan isn't going to be a panacea. There are other short-term and other interventions that we need to put in place. That's why, obviously with Sheila O'Neill, our new director, we're really putting a focus on undertaking a review of how we can effectively bring forward sites for housing delivery. That'll look across all areas of the delivery programme, including our own Weave and through the Calderdale Together Housing Investment Board and elsewhere. So we have been developing a pipeline of schemes, and I'm sure you're aware of some of those. We've also been successful in bidding for revenue funding from Wicker to work on a number of schemes, including Minster View, because that's what we're calling it now. It is known as Minster View, no matter what it's previously been known as. And making sure that they're brought forward and working with some RPs at the same time, registered providers, to bring a pipeline of events. That means it's not pipeline of events, pipeline of housing schemes. That means we've got at least 573 to deliver over the next 2 or 3 years. But clearly planning are currently working in quite a challenging environment. And I think as we move towards the implementation of the local plan, that will make things easier for the planning department at large. But like we said, it is only one part of that. So I think it's really important to reiterate that re-looking afresh at our housing implementation is really important to make sure we get the delivery right for those people that are desperate to move to Calderdale. I think we're finding at the moment that people really are moving here in their droves. They really believe in Calderdale. They're attracted to it because of our arts, culture, environment. So I hope that's helpful. I know you've already had the answer to the question, and I just tried to elaborate a little bit on it. Hope that was okay.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Councillor Patient. Okay, right, now we have the motion. There is only one motion on the order paper, for which I'm very thankful because there have been that many changes to it in the last half an hour of me head spinning. So to start with, I need to ask Councillor Scullion to please ask for the consent of the meeting without debate that the alteration to the motion be accepted. Following that, I will come to Councillor Baker and we'll explain that when we get there. Firstly to you, Councillor Scullion, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I will be very dependent on Mr Hughes to keep us straight procedurally.
Likewise.
I want to ask the leave of the council meeting to move the amended wording which has been of the motion, which has been circulated by Mr Hughes during the break. And I want to ask the leave of the council for that motion, the original motion, to be amended in the way that is outlined in the circulation email. Thank you.
Thank you. So I guess at this point then, Mr Hughes, I ask all those in favour. Is that correct?
You do, Madam Mayor, yes, please.
Wonderful, thank you. Right, all those in favour, please show.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If you can ask all against, please.
All against, please show.
That's less than, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, members. So that is passed. Now I need to refer to my notes. Now, Councillor Baker, my note from Mr Hughes says to have Councillor Baker ask for his seconder to consent to the withdrawal of the amendment and for the meeting to then do the same. Councillor Baker.
Yes, Madam Mayor. So obviously with that original motion being amended to incorporate many of the points we wish to make, we're then happy to kind of withdraw our amendment. If the seconder of our amendment is also happy to do that, I'm happy to do so.
Councillor Evans.
I'm happy to do that, Madam Mayor. Sorry, button's a bit small for my fat thumb. Yes.
Okay, that's grand. Thank you. Right, so I don't need to go back to the meeting to...
Madam Mayor, sorry, now that Councillor Baker has proposed that withdrawal and Councillor Evans has consented to that, the meeting does need to do the same or asked whether it consents to the withdrawal of that amendment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hughes. Right, so can I see all those in favour of withdrawing the amendment then, please, members?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
And any against, please, members?
That's less than, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, members. Okay, right. I think we're on the straight and narrow now, and we have got the technicalities, which are rather complicated from my point of view for chairing anyway. So we've got the technicalities out of the way. So now it is over to Councillor Scullion to please move the motion, the motion as amended in the document that you have received by email during the break. Thank you. Please go ahead, Councillor Scullion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Beautifully steered. Some people might think that this motion that's in front of you tonight, as amended, that the moment has passed to be discussing this. Actually, we've got the vaccine rollout. People are getting giddy about the shops and the pubs reopening. But actually, we are arguing tonight that the time is exactly right for this motion. This is only the beginning of the recovery. We're not through the pandemic yet, and there's a lot still to do. And I think we owe it to those who lost their lives and their relatives and friends to learn the lessons from the pandemic as we go along. We've never done this before, and so we're still learning the lessons. And I want members here tonight to cast their minds back to last year. The beginning of the pandemic, there was a sense of everyone pulling together and helping in the dark times. And I thought it was a very positive manifestation of the decency and kindness of the people of Calderdale. We now understand, though, we've learned the lesson that the pandemic has affected people differently depending on their circumstances. Some people and some areas have been relatively unscathed. It wasn't great, but if you had a job where you could work at home, some family support, a steady income, then you could get through the pandemic. But we understand that it's been a great deal harder for some rather than others. It's been harder for older people, for people living on their own, for children of all ages, for small businesses, as we mentioned earlier, especially those who just started up as the virus hit, and definitely harder for people who were on universal credit or were only just managing financially. The impact of the pandemic has been unequal, and this motion highlights just some of the actions that need to happen if we're to get back to that sense of responsibility as a council for those who are suffering the most difficulties, and take into the next year going forward a sense of how we level up the borough, if I could use that phrase. The motion speaks for itself, and actually you could have put all kinds of things in it. The pandemic's reached into all corners of our society. We could have talked about the cultural recovery, could have talked about transport and so on. But I wanted to highlight 4 particular aspects. The first of those is the call to the government in terms of making the £20 universal credit increase permanent. We think it's very harsh to actually withdraw that even in October. We think the government should commit wholeheartedly, and we certainly do as Calderdale Council, to invest in jobs and skills. This is going to be very difficult. And we also want tapered support for businesses. We think a number are going to fall off a cliff edge when the furlough and so on is withdrawn. We also want to see real investment in mental health for adults, but particularly for children. And you'll see that in the revised motion, we can't cover everything, but we have got a commitment in there to getting on with our Green Deal, our Green Renewal. We have added in a reference with the Liberal Democrats to housing, because the pandemic has showed us that inequality in housing has really meant some people have suffered. We need to look at the quality of our existing housing as well as new housing. And also thinking about regeneration. This motion is about a fair recovery, and we are looking at how we can spread that regeneration effort and indeed housing effort across the whole borough. We really do want to make sure that the recovery from the pandemic doesn't take us back to the old normal, but gives us a way of being hopeful about the future. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will stop there.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Scullion. Now to second, I believe it's Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And to second this motion, what I will be doing is bringing some of the human voices that we heard on the place detail review and economic inequalities. So, as Councillor Scullion said, for lots of people, they were disproportionately impacted during COVID-19. So what we heard was lots of groups that were already in financially precarious situations. COVID-19 tipped them over the edge. So disabled people and other people needing to shield, talks about the increased costs of having to get supermarket deliveries, buy PPE, take taxis instead of public transport, increased heating, electricity and food bills, meaning lots of people were no longer able to manage. We heard stories about the increasing numbers of people having to service debt. So instead of using their money to buy food for their families, they were now using their money to pay for debt. We heard people from Black, Asian, minority, ethnic and refugee backgrounds talk about how stark the digital divide was, and about the fact that we had mums trying to homeschool with one device, a phone, or other people saying they had no ability to look for work or training because they had no digital access. We hear stories from young people who talked about the stress of their predicted grades and what that meant for the future, their work experience being cancelled, part-time jobs no longer existing, the apprenticeship they hoped to move on to disappearing because the company had collapsed. We heard stories from social housing providers talking about the amount of tenants no longer able to pay their rent and their concern about the future in terms of increased homelessness. We heard stories of parents of children with special educational needs and disabilities talking about the huge impact of schools closing and carers and support workers no longer being able to go in their houses, and how suddenly they were expected to provide 24-hour care with no respite, meaning it was virtually impossible to run their businesses or work. We heard stories from women in every single group and from every background talking about the expectation of them to deliver the majority of the homeschooling, meaning that they had to turn down hours at work, work opportunities, progression. In some experiences, they had to take unpaid leave or totally leave their jobs. And we heard from every single group the huge toll COVID-19 had taken on their mental health. Madam Mayor, a return to the status quo won't help the people we spoke to. They need a progressive vision. And so I am seconding this motion because what these people need is a fair and green recovery based on their lived reality and experience during COVID. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kavanagh. Now I need to ask, are there any further amendments, councillors? I am not seeing anybody indicate that there are, which is wonderful. Okay, so we will debate the motion as is. Now, first on my list is Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will be brief, you'll be pleased to know. I just wonder if this had been, if we'd have had a different colour government and I'd raised issues like this, whether it would have been allowed a few weeks before election time. We're told we have to keep politics out of it. And that's my first point. I have a few other points, and then I do have some questions for Councillor Scullion, and I will add a lot of what is in here I don't disagree with. You know, please don't think I'm just opposing this purely on political view. I notice on the first paragraph, Councillor Scullion, via you, Madam Mayor, that you say that nationally over 150,000 people have lost their lives. I presume you mean totally to COVID-19. I've been on the ONS site, Office of National Statistics, and 2 days ago it stood as 127,000, and that doesn't include what other illnesses they may have had, respiratory, heart disease, I'm sure you understand. I heard a very interesting debate 6 months ago, and somebody said there's been 350 under 60s have died of COVID since this all kicked off. And the answer was, yes, there's 400 people have drowned under 60. Are their lives less important? So whilst I don't want to lessen the concern and the seriousness of it, can we just get a little bit of perspective here? There are other points, and I won't hold up people from this, but I would like to know, Councillor Scullion, I do agree with a lot of what you say, and I do agree with the aspirations and that we must, and we've got to work together with this, let's be honest. But have you ever actually looked at what this nation's debt has now become? How many millions a day we are spending supporting businesses and people? And I'm not denying there are people struggling. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not demeaning it. But this is really racking up day by day by day. And we've got to consider that in everything we try and push forward. And I would like to know what we stop funding to provide for this. I appreciate times of emergency, times of war, times of things like this, concerns like this. We do have to, yes, put our hands in our pockets, or should I say, borrow money from time to time. But I'd like to know, sorry, Madam Mayor, I am going via you, to Councillor Scullion, have you considered these points when you put this together? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Councillor Taylor. Next on my list, I have Councillor Baker. But before I come to you, Councillor Baker, can I just check, Councillor Lee, you have your hand raised again. Are you wishing to comment on the motion?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I shall add you to the list then. It would be helpful if you could write it in the chat, because then we know which order everybody's requested in. So, okay, over to you, Councillor Baker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll try and speak at a decent pace to get things in. The pandemic has obviously been a huge time for us all to introspect. It's been a time for grieving. It's been a time of hardship. It's been a time that has tested all of us in different ways. I don't think there's any person on this call who hasn't in some ways been affected by that experience. And it's a shared experience that we've all had as a nation. I absolutely think it's essential that we try and seize this opportunity to rethink our society and to change it for the better. So what we sought to do with our amendment tonight was focus on 3 particular issues. There's so many you could pick on, as Councillor Scullion said at the start. We wanted to have a look at the Green New Deal stuff, and that's testament to the communities out there in Calderdale who are campaigning for climate change and have created their Green New Deal pledge that they're trying to get people to take. And this is an opportunity for us tonight to vote for this motion and implement that pledge and really commit to strong change on climate change. And it's absolutely essential that we don't just come out with a plan, but we actually act. And any plan we do have has got clear actions and timescales, so we know we can implement it. That is a real lesson that we need to learn as an authority. It's a lot harder, as we all know, to do things in practice than just plan them. The second one was about the housing issue. Unfortunately, Calderdale has performed historically badly on the housing issue, bottom 15 local authorities in the country, and I'm glad there is now a recognition across the council that it's an issue, an area that we need to focus at more. Particularly focusing on the left behind communities that we have across Calderdale and the real pockets of deprivation we have, where there's some real entrenched housing issues and poverty issues we need to tackle. And the third one was about fairness across all of the wards in Calderdale. So that's about us thinking about how we do regeneration, so that even those wards that are outside of towns, in those kind of urban suburbs, there's so many of those places across the north that are getting left behind at the moment, that have fallen outside of the government's town funding system. So we focus on those suburban northern areas, largely kind of housing estates, where there's some real left behind communities and some real poverty. So I'm really glad if we can vote for this and make a commitment, and let's hope we can try and build back better after this pandemic. Look what Biden's doing over in the States with his new jobs plan, how he's taking that Keynesian economic model and applying it to a green recovery and creating new jobs for people. And I know our hands are somewhat tied by the funding situation we find ourselves in. But if we can do everything we can as an authority to build back better, to build back a Green New Deal, and to sort out the housing for the people of Calderdale, that would be a fantastic achievement.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Baker. Now on my list, I have Councillor Dacre, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I just comment firstly about the number of deaths, there are different ways of calculating the deaths. There can either be whether or not they've died, people have died within 28 days of a positive COVID test or death, or whether COVID is mentioned on the death certificate, so it can depend on which figure that you're looking at. But what I really wanted to pick up on was the point that Councillor Baker has just been making about the recovery across the borough, and the fact that we need a fair recovery that benefits all of our communities across the borough, and asks for a mechanism for communities in wards not currently covered by town boards to develop regeneration projects. And I would like to think that we have made a small start on this. Recently, Councillor Baker and other Liberal Democrats approached us and pointed out that, exactly as he said tonight, the way in which government funding tends to be structured is that it tends to go towards high streets, town centres, and that leaves suburban areas lacking. And it was agreed that the Liberal Democrats would speak to residents and suggest proposals which might benefit their areas, and which we can then are then there, I think the word has been used, in the back pocket for when funding opportunities come along, so we're aware of them and perhaps able to move on them. Whereas, because, as has been said already, these funding opportunities are often, they have very short windows in which you have to apply. So it really does help if you know in advance what there is out there that you might want to fund. So we're very much look forward to receiving some ideas, and the invitation is extended really to other areas which don't fit into the categories that so far have tended to benefit from most of the funding.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Dacre. Next on my list, I have Councillor Fenton Glynn, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is the last meeting of my first term as a councillor. All being well and subject to democracy, I hope there is a second term. But within those 5 years, this has obviously been the biggest challenge that the council has faced in that time. And I have to say that our officers, our staff and our community and councillors from all parties have passed that test with flying colours, and I couldn't be more proud. At the start of the pandemic, we heard a lot of people say that the pandemic was a great leveller, but that wasn't true. The pandemic was like one of those mirrors at a theme park which exposes your biggest features, and it really has in our society. It was a microscope, not a leveller. It has exposed the inequalities in our benefit system. It's shown the burden of childcare on women. It's shown the jobs that can be done from home and the people who can save that money, while it's also shown us what jobs really are key to our economy, the people that we couldn't do without, be they our care workers, be they the people that work in shops, the people who deliver, the people who we ask to put themselves at risk. It's shown the difference in health and life expectations based on incomes and what community you come from. It's also shown the impact of a local government system starved of funding for 10 years, and a health system which has made it much more difficult to deal with this pandemic. But it's also shown the best of us. It's shown us clapping for carers. It's shown us coming together. It's shown people volunteering. I mean, I remember at the last council meeting, we talked about some of the amazing work that Marilyn Greenwood had done, kind of organising her community deliveries. It's shown that people will roll up their sleeves and help each other, and that communities can come together. I'm supporting this motion, and I hope everyone in the spirit of those communities coming together will come together and vote for this motion. Vote for us to build back a better, fairer economy and a stronger Calderdale, the kind of society that everyone here gets involved in politics to see.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fenton Glynn. Next on my list, I have Councillor Evans, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think Councillor Baker has made the main points that we as a group feel in relation to this motion into housing, the environment, the New Deal and so on. What I really want to say is that we're pleased to see that the Cabinet's taken on board the key elements of our alternative motion. We agreed obviously with the main content of the first motion, but we felt it didn't go far enough, which is why we put the alternative down. We're also pleased to see that they've decided to include all 17 wards as part of this, because Whalley is just as deprived of Park Ward, for example, where all sorts of funding and improvements are being planned. There's also a Whalley Inclusive Economy Steering Group, and little, if anything, is taken note of in relation to Whalley. So what I'm homing in on is the need for a fair deal for Whalley in all of this, along with the other wards which have not been included because of the way it's been structured in the past. What we will be doing, of course, is keeping an eye on the actions after this motion to make sure that these things actually happen, rather than they're just agreed in council and then things take ages or don't really happen as a result of things. And I would hope that we don't just see things happen paid for out of the back pocket. I think one previous councillor was suggesting. I would like to see as part of the main financial structure that it covers all of those people in the wards and that we get a fair deal for all of our wards. And in my case, of course, Whalley Ward in particular. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Evans. Councillor Hutchinson, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Eminent scientists from University College London and King's College London recently published research in the British Medical Journal, which makes the point very clearly that the ability of people to self-isolate reduces with their degree of financial hardship. Huge amounts of public money continue to be spent on testing for coronavirus, but tragically little investment in financial support for those households who are identified to be affected by coronavirus, which are required to self-isolate. Without isolation, testing is pointless. Such support that exists is subject to eligibility criteria that many in the worst affected communities find difficult to meet. Support needs to be available when it's most critical, as soon as someone receives a positive test or is informed that they are a contact of such a case. The current arrangements deter people from seeking a test when they fall ill. They make no sense in controlling the spread of infection and run a serious risk of further economic damage to this country that would far exceed the cost of providing support. We need to make such support available to the people of Calderdale in the coming weeks and months, because vaccination by itself is not the whole answer.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hutchinson. Councillor Lee, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is the view of our group. We're most unhappy about the motion in general, and in particular, at this time of national mourning and during the restricted election period. We think it's an ill-judged attempt to make cheap political points about COVID at the very time we should be coming together as political parties in the continued fight against the pandemic and not setting ourselves apart in the manner clearly intended by this motion. As the council has noted, over 300 people have died of COVID in Calderdale. We queried the legality of this motion in the hope that it might be withdrawn. And we are disappointed that it's been allowed. And it's been allowed to proceed on the basis that we think it is clearly political. It calls for our chief executive to get involved during the election period of Purda, and is being proposed by a candidate standing for election at this time. So we're not going to dignify or remotely legitimise the motion by giving it our further attention, other than to vote against it and request that the vote be recorded if that is allowed. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lee. Next on my list, I have Councillor Barnes, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I'm going to completely, after hearing that, I'm going to completely change what I was going to say. I think Councillor Kavanagh spoke best. She spoke eloquently. She spoke passionately, describing the true human impact that this pandemic has had, revealing the massive discrepancies that remain within our society and within our communities. Anyone who's ever watched a war film will remember the phrase, no one left behind. Well, we have left people behind. People are still being left behind. And it's time to say no more. It is time to take that step forward. And therefore I am proud and pleased to support this motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barnes. Next, Councillor Patient, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll just be brief, really, and clearly some of the elements in there about housing have already been well rehearsed elsewhere, but I just want to focus immediately on the Green New Deal element, which is clearly something a lot of councillors on this call believe in and have signed that pledge. I think what it does is it re-emphasises how strongly we feel about tackling the climate crisis, in mitigating that warmth by 1.5% that the Committee on Climate Change and the IPCC have recognised we need to reduce. We're currently at 1.1 degrees, and it's an existential crisis that we're all facing, from the people of the Upper Valley fighting flooding on a regular basis, to people who actually might not have felt that they've been affected so far, but rising and spiralling food and energy prices will soon bring it home to them, and everyone actually who lives in the UK and internationally. I think what's important to re-emphasise is that this is a cross-party issue. The water that falls that extra water that's falling as a increased increased climate due to warming that's happening more and more frequently falls on Tory shires in the north of Yorkshire. It travels then through Liberal and Green dominated York, and then down into Labour dominated West Yorkshire. So it very, very much is something that we all need to be keeping our eye on. I think I just want to emphasise, in terms of the Liberal amendment that we've then amended, it's really good, because what I want to say is we've currently done a piece of work called the Emission Reduction Pathwork. And we're the first one in West Yorkshire to do this, based on a West Yorkshire Combined Authority piece of work. I'm really glad when we did do the climate emergency that we didn't whip out an action plan immediately. I know a lot of other boroughs did. And I feel like actually the work we're doing on this, trailblazing in fact, is going to be a real key indicator for us to point us in the right direction to make those changes. It's going to be difficult, but I just want to re-emphasise the fact that we can do it together. It's a cross-party issue, it's an existential issue, and it's a key part of this amendment, and that's why I support it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Patient. And last on my list is Councillor Lynn, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'd like to speak very much in support of this motion and in support of the very helpful amendments put forward by the Liberal Democrat group. And I'd like particularly to focus on the section really which talks about fairness in terms of regeneration and recovery across the borough. I'm afraid I do have to part company with some of the comments made by Councillor Ashley Evans. And I would like, just very briefly, if I may, just to put the record straight. Councillor Evans referred to the Inclusive Economy Programme, saying that, I think I'm correct in saying that he said that it covers Worley Ward, but that essentially Worley Ward haven't seen much of the benefits. First thing to note is it doesn't cover the whole of Worley Ward. It covers that section of Worley Ward which is immediately adjoining Park Ward and which is subject to relatively high levels of deprivation. Secondly, there are a number of elements of that programme which are certainly open to all residents of that part of Whalley covered by the scheme and of Park Ward. And to give examples, those would include support for businesses, an opportunity for community organisations to bid in for projects which they think will enhance the skills and employability of their residents, and so on. And finally, that inclusive economy project does have a steering group, which does include and is open to elected members in both wards. So I just wanted to put that on record, because I wouldn't like people to run away with the idea that this, and it's a pilot programme, but that this inclusive economy programme is not delivering for the people for whom it was set up, because I actually think it is. But I would very much hope that in the spirit of cross-party cooperation, I'm grateful to the Liberal Democrats for the contributions they've made to this resolution, and I hope very much that it will be approved by full council tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lynn. Councillor Holdsworth, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to say that I was part of the group led by Rosine Kavanagh that looked into the COVID inequalities. It was completely cross-party, and the findings were, as she said, absolutely shocking in terms of the impact made by COVID on people who were already struggling, whether they were young people, people from the BAME communities, school-aged children. It was quite shocking to see how badly COVID had impacted on groups that were already struggling. And I fully support this motion. And I'm disappointed that Councillor Lee thinks that in some way this motion breaches PERDA. I don't believe it does. The whole problem was looked into long before elections were considered, and to discuss the impact across the borough on all our residents, whatever their background, I think is perfectly fair and legitimate. And I do think that it's reasonable to support the motion and not to dismiss it out of hand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Holdsworth. Are there any further members wishing to ask a question at this point? I'm not seeing anybody indicate. Okay, lovely. So I now go back to Councillor Scullion to sum up, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've always tried to behave with dignity and respect for other councillors in this chamber, even if it's a virtual chamber. I will perhaps not therefore comment on some of the comments that were made this evening. I just wanted to say that this council, this borough, has been absolutely battered by, first of all, the floods, and then following that, the pandemic itself. I am really proud of Calderdale. I'm really proud of what we've done in terms of kindness and community and keeping each other safe. And this motion is intended to continue that work. I shall stop there, Madam Mayor. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Scullion. Councillor Swift, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I thank people who've contributed to supporting the motion, and hope that that council will agree it. Just want to be very clear that clearly the motion is in order, and certainly I think going back some while and thinking back to council meetings that were held during election periods before both the 2010 and the 2015 general elections, I don't recollect there being any unwillingness of members to make political comments in those meetings. There is perhaps a separate question of whether our timetable makes sense and whether there'd be a case for the last council meeting of the cycle taking place a bit early, but that's something we can look at in the new year. I agree with Councillor Scullion. This is an important issue, and in a sense, you know, assuming that the progress which we talked about earlier continues, this is where we move to a next phase of focusing on the recovery, and this motion in many ways sets out those priorities. I would just say very briefly in terms of the question about deaths for the amongst the under 60s, whilst there are some variations in how you define deaths from COVID, it is substantially higher than the number that a councillor quoted earlier. I understand that up to January, for example, it was something like 7,000 deaths of people under 60 where COVID was mentioned as a factor on their death certificate, which is one of the definitions that is used. And we talked earlier that even for those who, that as well as people who died from COVID, of course, there are significant and still developing and unknown risks of longer term complications. In terms of money, I also just want to highlight particularly Councillor Hutchinson's point. I'm sorry if other people feel this is political, but I really do not understand of all the decisions, and I appreciate there are some difficult decisions at all levels, but of all the decisions the government is taking, the refusal to provide better funding for people to self-isolate really does seem to me the most self-defeating policy of anything, because it so much undermines the self-isolation that we need to contain it. And in terms of some of the other schemes, and again, understand why some of the early schemes perhaps were not as well targeted as they could be. But when you look at the hundreds of millions of pounds which some of the big retail supermarkets have felt constrained to hand back because they were embarrassed to receive those grants when they were also profitable. If you look at the amount of money that was pledged for the insulation scheme, which really never got on the ground and which remains underspent, the amount of money which would be required to adequately fund self-isolation, it really is quite minuscule compared with those. And I just really do not understand the refusal to recognise and fund that adequately. However, I think we've had a good debate generally amongst those who supported this motion, and I trust that the council will do so. And if people feel they want a recorded vote, I am absolutely fine with that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Swift. Okay, so as Councillor Lee mentioned a named vote, Ian has suggested that I ask for a show of hands as to whether or not people would like a named vote on this item. So if you can please, councillors, turn your cameras on.
That's not the right motion, Madam Mayor. I'm sorry, but members have got the right to have a named vote after.
Councillor Blackburn, you muted yourself
I did, yeah. No, my apologies, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, actually, the use of a named vote is after the vote has been taken place. So actually, that would take place, and we can request a named vote from our party.
Indeed, so thank you very much for the reminder, Councillor Blackburn. This motion did rather befuddle me to start with all the changes to it. So. Yeah, I hope you'll forgive me that slight error. Okay, so we'll have a vote first and then sort out the named vote afterwards. Okay, thank you very much, members. So can I see all those in favour of the motion, please show.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
And any against, please show.
That's less than, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, members. Now the question of the named vote. Now, normally this would be called by members standing up to indicate that they wish to call for a named vote. That is somewhat impractical while we're on Zoom. So I shall simply ask for a show of hands because we can't think of any other way to do it. So can I have a show of hands, please, for anybody who would like to have a named vote on this item?
That's more than 10, Madam Mayor.
Okay, named vote it is then. So we go over to Mr. Hughes to to carry out the named vote, as he hopefully has the required bits of paper handy to do so.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Baines.
Against.
Councillor Baker.
For.
Councillor Barnes.
For.
Councillor Bellinger.
For.
Councillor Blackborough.
Against.
Councillor Caffrey.
Against.
Councillor Mrs. Carter.
Against.
Councillor Kavanagh.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Collins.
For.
Councillor Courtney.
For.
Councillor Dacre.
For.
Councillor Dickinson.
Against.
Councillor Evans.
For.
Councillor Fenton Glynn.
Proudly for.
Sorry, I didn't hear that, Councillor Fenton Glynn.
Proudly for.
Sorry?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Foster. Sorry, Madam Mayor.
Abstain.
Councillor Gallagher.
For.
Councillor Hardy. Is Councillor Hardy in the meeting still? Councillor Hardy.
No, he's not. He's not
Thank you.
in.
Councillor Holdsworth.
For.
Councillor Hutchinson.
For.
Councillor Curtin.
Against.
Councillor Lambert.
For.
Councillor Lee.
Against.
Councillor Lynn.
For.
Councillor Metcalfe.
For.
Councillor Parsons Hulse.
For.
Councillor Patient.
For.
Councillor Peel. Councillor Peel. Councillor Porritt.
For.
So I can just check. Does Councillor Pillai managed to join the meeting? Councillor Pillai?
I think he did, and then he left again. Ian.
Thank you. So Councillor
Lovely.
Porritt was for. Councillor Press.
For.
Councillor Raystrick.
Abstain.
Councillor Rivron.
For.
Councillor Robinson.
Against.
Councillor Scullion.
For.
Councillor A. Smith.
For.
Councillor B. Smith.
For.
Councillor Sutherland.
For.
Councillor M. Swift.
Muted, Councillor Swift.
Councillor Megan Swift. You raise your hand, Megan, Councillor Swift, if, with a thumb up, please. Thank you. That's 4. Councillor T. Swift.
For.
Councillor Taylor.
Against.
Councillor Whitaker.
Against.
Councillor Wilkinson.
For.
And Councillor Young.
For.
Thank you.
Ian, you didn't call my name out. Councillor 9.
Sorry, Councillor Naim, my apologies. Councillor Naim? 4. Thank you.
That would make a big difference, I'm sure.
Thank you very much indeed, members, for that. I think it was a good and constructive debate. Okay, so that motion is then carried, and we will put that forward as we need to. Okay, so item 13, and then I remind you we go back to item 6 for the cabinet decisions which are exempt. So item 13, comments on the work of scrutiny boards, panels, committees and questions without notice to the chairs of scrutiny boards, panels and committees. Are there any comments? Councillor Carter, you wanted to speak on this item?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I would just like to speak on the item that came up in strategy and performance with regards to the Calderdale elections update. And I would just like to say at this point that I wish the election staff all the best in trying to conduct this election under these dreadful COVID restrictions, and actually tell them that they're not going to have to put up with me again at this election. They've been doing that since 1994, since 1992, I think, something like that. But I won't be around this time because I'll still have a job to be done, so I won't be around for the election.
Carter, sorry to interrupt, but you have done something to your microphone which is distorting your speech.
I haven't done anything. Don't tell me it's
Sorry, I've had to mute you, Councillor Carter, because it is coming across very much like a Dalek.
Oh, well, no, that's not surprising. Can you hear me now?
No.
No, it's very difficult to hear you. I think we got the gist of what you were saying. You were wishing the election staff well for the and thanking them for all their hard work. Is that right? I'm so sorry. If we can't hear you at all because you're now muted, Councillor Carter, but I think try very, very briefly again and see if it's any better. And if it's just as bad, then I'm very sorry, but we'll have to sort of we'll have to leave it. Try very briefly again.
Is it doing it now?
Yes, it's dreadful. Try turning your video off and see if that helps.
Right now.
No, it's still awful. I'm so sorry, Councillor Carter. It's dreadful. It's such a shame for the last comments from you. I'm so sorry that it's just incredibly difficult to hear what you were saying. But yes, we'll I don't know what to do to fix it either. I'm very sorry.
Well, I don't know what I can do.
Well, there you are. It's much better. That was loads better. Try again, Councillor Carter. Councillor Carter, if you unmute now and try saying what you were going to say.
Just to thank you, the election staff, and everybody else who helps. Has it gone again?
No, it's absolutely marvellous right now. Carry on quickly before it goes again.
And all staff, previous council staff that I've loved to see on the occasions of the elections, which I'm not going to see this next time. And just to spite you all to latch onto something, a response. I found something to latch onto as a response for all those good wishes that were done earlier. And to say thank you very much to all the staff that have worked with me over the years, and to all you as members. I will really miss you. It's not about politics, it's about looking after the community. And I'll really respect all of you and will miss you immensely. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carter. I'm so pleased we were able to hear what you wanted to say at the end. And certainly meetings will never be the same without you. Take that as you will. But yes,
it might be a lot better.
we will miss you. I'm certain we will miss you. So thank you very much indeed for your comments, and I'm sure Ian and the team will pass them on to all those who need to hear them.
Thank you.
Okay, right. Are there any further comments on item 13? I'm not seeing anybody indicate. Okay, so we're going to go on to item 6, but we need to pause